I would like to say now one thing about the exhibition here downstairs, because the work here by Artur Żmijewski is a beautiful introduction to this whole room and to one part of the book and the exhibition, namely shaming and making somebody shameful. What we see here in these images, it are, by the way, it's examples of chrono photography. It was a technique already invented in the 19th century and practiced by Muybridge and Marais, very famous photographers of the 19th century. But what you see here is gestures of hate, of contempt, of exclusion. That's what they say. And the kind of object of contempt or of exclusion is not really clear. It is not a certain specific political position. There's not a specific ideology. It's not clear. Anyway, what you see is just gestures of hate, contempt, and exclusion. Natasja, as I explained, male dignity depends on two important issues: their sexuality and their authority. And what is very striking that I think in your work they come together. You everywhere you see, how do you say that? Expressions of their sexuality, but you see also military figures, soldiers, so male authority, men in power are also everywhere there. That's, however, not the issue, and that's an important reason why you were selected for this exhibition. But here in the exhibition we have some drawings of you, 5 or 6 even, and there's one painting at the other end of this space, a painting of Bouterse in drag, very shameful indeed. But what is remarkable about your work is that your drawings are made in such a completely different way as your paintings. Your drawings are all extremely made fast, whereas your paintings are extremely slow. There's one layer of paint on the other. Your act of drawing is very restless. And it almost evokes a kind of arousal, rage, incitement. So could you, in a way, elaborate or explain how the act of drawing or how your drawings as such, in a way, relate to the issue of shame? Nee, ik hou hem.
Oh, jij houdt hem vast.
Ja.
Okay,
Ja.
Well, in my work, I'm very obsessed about human conditions, and it's almost like I every day ask myself a question about how human beings, the relationship between identity and with the human being itself, the society in which it lives, and the relationship between man and nature, but also with religion. And in these questions, I'm especially interested in the isolation of man, which you also mentioned before. The isolation of man, his loneliness, his abyss, and also the dramatic loss of freedom and sexuality, of course, violence and the craving for power, and also. What is particular in human condition is the urge to create, but above all to destroy it. And I think shame is a very strong, culturally determined phenomenon. Because, and what I try to express in the drawings is that somehow the suffering and the adversity of humankind is also something that pleases me in a way, and what I like to draw about. And
but how does it reflect that in the act of drawing? Because it is not only the topics you are in a way drawing and painting, but the way you draw is quite different from the way you paint.
Yeah, well, when I paint, it goes very slow because you have to build up a lot of images, and it's built up with many layers. Yeah. And paint is a different material because it has to dry. And with drawings, that goes very directly. I think drawing is directly a registration of the mind. Yeah. And in that period that I make this work, I was very, very angry, and my head was full of emotions that I have to express. And have to reflect on the world also. And
that is so striking, I think, about your drawings, that the way you draw, how you draw, it almost is a kind of act of making the issues you represent shameful.
Yes, I think you're right. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Yeah. Now, perhaps this is a good conclusion about your work. Welcome, Nalini Malani. A few months ago, when we met and I told you about the topic of this exhibition I was curating, you were so excited about it, you immediately offered to make some works for this exhibition. And what you made 3 iPod animations, and they are really impressive, and they, compared to or in contrast with Natasja Kensmil's contributions, her work are refer to the present, but also to kind of mythical and biblical motifs and context. Your work is very much inspired by the present and by the Indian context. First of all, by your Prime Minister, Modi, and how he has reformed the Indian state into a Hindu nationalist state. But second, quite often in recent years there are reports about extremely violent rapes by groups of men in India. Could you now elaborate how your works, the works you made for this exhibition, relate to that Indian context? And it would be nice not to say something about what we see, but also how you made these works.
Right. I made these works on my iPad with my fingers. I don't use an Apple Pencil. I work directly on the screen, and it's almost like a child. But the feeling and the sensuosity of actually working on the screen with the different tools is like dipping your fingers into paint. And so the feeling is pretty organic rather than a kind of a digital method of working. So that's what I like, because I do like the organic nature of drawing on paper or other surfaces that I use. About what I was absolutely disappointed and worried about, what was happening in India, was the epidemic of rapes. And not only rapes on grown women, but on helpless children. And one of the reasons for these rapes on helpless, vulnerable girl children was the fact that it was almost as if on the bodies of these little girls was written the idea of the other religion, which is something that we are suffering today. The Indian Constitution is one of the best, I think, that we have. The very first thing that it says is all are equal in the eyes of the Republic of India. So, and we have many religions, and the main religion is Hindu, and the rest are Muslims, Roman Catholics, Protestants, and even Jewish people, and Parsis, who are Zoroastrian. So all of this was going to be one nation as the Republic of India was formed in 1947. And we already had the vote for women from the very inception, which was very rare in some other countries. In fact, Switzerland had the right to vote for women much later. Now, the thing was that since the rise of orthodoxy in religion, people have taken it amongst themselves to mark women's bodies. And it's almost like choosing the most vulnerable part of society to do this. Not only the minority communities, but also the lowest caste in the hierarchy of caste in Hinduism. What used to be called during the colonial era the untouchable, and today they are called Dalits. And the most recent case has been even last month in September. A girl of 19 she was cutting grass in a field, and 4 boys from the upper caste came and strangled her, broke her back, raped her, and cut her tongue so she may not speak. Now, for me, the outrage of the fact that she may not even speak about who these people were, so they will not be recognized, that's one aspect. And it also reminded me of a story from Ovid, from the Metamorphoses, where a minor king has been asked by the father of his wife to take the younger sister to his kingdom, and the little girl is called Philomela. And on the way, he rapes her and cuts her tongue off. And this is already in the 4th century of the Christian era. So we are talking about something that took place then and even now. And that's the thing that is horrifying, that where have we changed? Where have we progressed? Now, one other aspect of raping is also othering. The woman is the other. And that is problematic in terms of male psyche. Pushing the idea of the other into the woman, she's the one who then becomes the provocateur. Because then the whole case got turned around. It's she who provoked the boys. So the victim then becomes the culprit. So there's a whole manipulation happening here. And even being brought to the courts that it is actually the family and the girl who wanted to reach out to the upper caste. And therefore, this has happened. And it's not the boys. The boys are squeaky clean.
Thank you, Nalini. What a horrible story. And it also makes clear that when a rape is already horrible enough, but when they also have to cut off the tongue. Of the victim, that also shows how symbolic this act is.
Right.
It is much more than just about sex or sexual pleasure, not at all.
Yes, exactly.
Thank you.
Yes, well, thank you very much.
I will now go to the work of Marlene Dumas. And Marlene Dumas, she could not be present today, but she sent me some very nice words, and I would like to begin by just reading what she said. It is in Dutch, unfortunately, but I think for most people here it's no problem. Hier Ernst, ik dacht, aangezien ik niet over mijn werk ga spreken, ik wel een paar zinnen aan jou wou geven, voor in geval jij iets over mij wou zeggen. Toen kwam onverwachts een van mijn favoriete liedjes bij mij uit de jaren 70. Lola van de Kings en Take a Walk on the Wild Side van Lou Reed. En Shame, Shame, Shame met die lyrics. Shame on you if you can't dance too. Ach, en zoveel meer. Zin om te dansen en te drinken op de fluidity of sexuality. Bijna iedereen is geobsedeerd met wat? Wat is dat? Wat ben jij? Wie ben jij? Maar er is de hoe van dat wat, de waarom en waar naartoe van dat wat. De grillige meerduidigheid en veranderlijkheid van dat wat. Mensen mogen zich schamen, maar kunst is alles of het is niets. Kunst is wanhopig, schaamteloos. Daarom is ook niet alles wat iets is kunst. Oké, hier zien we werk van Marlene Dumas. Boven is ook nog meer, hier hangen ook nog werken. Maar er is één werk wat ik hier eigenlijk eruit wil halen. Omdat juist ook heel mooi het probleem van schaamte en mannelijkheid. En ik zou zeggen het probleem van mannelijkheid illustreert. We zien hier een portret van Marlene van Pasolini, de Italiaanse filmmaker, maar ook schrijver, Pasolini. En hieronder heeft zij een gedicht van hem vertaald naar het Nederlands geschreven. En dat is niet alleen een schitterend gedicht, maar ook juist het Nederlands van die vertaling is heel bijzonder. En daarom wil ik die toch voorlezen in het Nederlands. En mijn liefdes zijn louter taal van zinnen, gekneld tussen sacrale plooien van lust, sadistisch, masochistisch, de broeken met een lauwe zak waarin het lot van een man getekend ligt. Nou, mooier kan het niet, maar ik denk ook dat alle thema's en issues van deze tentoonstelling in dit gedicht van Pasolini bij elkaar komen. Maar het is ook wel schitterend Nederlands, al zeg ik het zelf. De meeste werken van haar zien we mannen afgebeeld in wat voor pose of welk lichaamsdeel dan ook. Hier zien we echter 2 keer 2 vrouwen. De een heet Beauty as Burden en de andere Two Bearded Beauties. Deze vrouwen zijn duidelijk slachtoffer geweest van een soort ontkenning van respect. En het is ook heel mooi hoe deze vrouw met zeer lang haar, eigenlijk is het niet duidelijk of ze een knuppel vasthoudt of de haar, maar ze gebruikt eigenlijk haar haar om de toeschouwer hier een draai om de oren te geven. We are here in the second part of the exhibition. This is Giselle's studio. And the works we are going to see here are different from downstairs. Downstairs it was all about shaming and making somebody or making certain issues shameful. Here at this floor it's much more about masculinities that are not shameful. And I can best illustrate or explain that issue of not problematic or non-shameful masculinities by a work of Marlene Dumas, which is not here in the exhibition, but which you can see in the book, and it's called The Making of Myths. That's the title. Marlene Dumas' titles are always very striking and very important, and it also gives all kinds of unexpected meanings to the visual image you see. What you see in that image is just very simple, an erection, an erected penis. Her title is The Making of Myths. So what is the problem of an erection? The problem of an erection is not sexually, there's no problem at all, I would say on the contrary. But the problem is that in our culture, an erect penis stands for the phallus. And the phallus has nothing to do with that male member, that male bodily part, but that is a kind of symbol, very important in our culture, that stands for power, control, and so on. All kinds of qualities that are in our culture exclusively attributed to men. So in that sense is an erection makes myths. Here, however, we see another work by Marlene Dumas. It's called Schets voor een monument voor de vrede. It's a sketch for a peace monument. And what we see is 2 little men, or perhaps this is perhaps a woman, this is a little man, and they are full of admiration for this flabby penis, an enormous penis. So this is the monument for the peace. But I think you should see this work in relation to this other work, The Making of Myths. This is not a myth, because this cannot be confused for a phallus. This is just a flabby penis. And in order to have a kind of monument for a peace monument, the penis should be represented in this way. Then we can adore it. But that's now for artists an enormous problem. Because of the symbolic value of the penis, and especially an erect penis, is it still possible to paint a penis? That's a major artistic challenge. Can you still? And Ina van Zijl, She is here with many of her works are a part of this exhibition, and that's exactly what she is doing, painting penises all the time. No, not all the time. She also paints other kind of things. But it's clear that Ina van Zijl has a very special interest in the penis. So I would like to welcome Ina. Let's see. In the past, now I've said something about your devotion to the penis, but there's more to say. In the past, you have made very specific and very to-the-point remarks about shame, and how shame, in a way, is always a kind of ground layer in your work. And I would like to quote you from an interview you made, I think, with Dominique van den Boogaard, perhaps 15 years ago, or even longer. But I think that's still a very important quote for an understanding of your work. And you said the following: if you were to make a diagram of the layers in my work, shame would be the bottom layer, the foundation on which everything rests, and at the same time, which is hidden most deeply. I'm not talking about specific shame, but shame in general. Shame is not good or bad. I want to emphasize that. But then you also have a remark about shamelessness, and that shamelessness, in a way, is by definition barbaric, so very bad. But why, can you explain, why is these two works, these two penises, one hanging, the other erect, not shameless? And in what way does it relate to shame?
I'm not so sure if I can say that they are shameless. The only thing that is perhaps the fact that they are paintings, and painting represents something civilized, and the context is civilized, so in that way it's not barbaric. But what I painted is, I would say, shameful, or at least a bit unsettling, especially this enlarged, erected penis. In this one, I more wanted to paint what you just explained about the phallus. In other words, the power and male domination. And I also think of, when I paint the penises, I also think of the contrast with penises and vaginas, because a penis, of course, has an important, more than one important physiological function, but it can also be misused.
Yeah, that's of course the misunderstanding that can be followed by this exhibition, because here you're especially represented by your penises, but your interest in the vagina is also very intense. You have painted many vaginas.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. So yeah, we see the male. But so I definitely in this one wanted to paint more the phallus, and I also the way I cropped it is quite aggressive, in my opinion. So I wanted to show that the penis can also do harm, and that directly relates to shame or shamelessness and shamefulness, because I think of rape, which is of course a very shameless act to do, and very shameful for the person who is being raped. This one is soft, as you can see, and it is a bit more in the dark, and so the two are quite different. But I think I have a lot of pleasure and fun when I work. So also when I make these works, I enjoy it, and I think that this one shows more the love or vulnerability that is also part of the human sex.
But let's go back to this one, which has the title Enlarged. And what you were saying about, in a way, this evokes power and is also related to rape. Does that mean that this in a way represents a kind of phallic masculinity, or is it impossible to represent an erection without the meaning of phallic masculinity?
That's difficult.
Is this just an erection, or is this a phallus?
Isn't that in the eye of the beholder?
Very good. That's the perfect answer. Yeah, very good. Let's go now to these two other paintings. They are rather different at first sight. Here we see a portrait of Angela Merkel. Here a portrait of Obama. Can you explain how these two works relate to shame?
In that quote that you just mentioned, I state that my oversensitivity for shame has been triggered by the non-democratic system where I grew up, which is apartheid in South Africa. And both of these two politicians, to me, are representative of democracy, and which is the opposite of that terrible, shameful system where I grew up, with all the harm that it did. And both of them, to me, are not the stereotypical male white politician.
But still you represented Obama with lowered eyes, and lowered eyes is one of the symptoms of shame.
Yeah. Well, that was because at the moment I painted this, I was very busy with shame. Yeah. And I made this whole exhibition about shame where you also contributed. Yeah. And I found this picture of him in a newspaper with his eyes down, and shortly before that I made a self-portrait in exactly the same pose. And because I admire him as a politician and the relation to shame and the systems, democracy versus apartheid, I painted that. So that's why it's with the downcast eyes.
I can see and understand fully that they, as politicians, have a lot in common, but you represented her not with her eyes down, but more or less looking upward, or at the same time not really addressing anybody, also not the viewer. What does that mean?
Well, I don't really make my work so that everything means something, but I think she is still she's still the stateswoman at the moment. So she has a sort of visionary. Well, she's looking at the future, and she looks quite concentrated. She doesn't look very happy, which I can understand, but that she often looks like that. Yeah. But I don't blame her for having that sort of sad expression.
Okay, thank you, Ina. We will now go to Hans Hovy, who hopefully is also somewhere here, but his work is presented in the same space as yours. And now let's first go to the four pedestals with four works of him. Hey, your work and Ina's work, they have things in common, but they are also very different. With Ina's work, you could say, her work is very literal. You see what you see, and in that sense, her work is very different from her fellow South African colleague Marlene Dumas. There, a lot of the meanings are always introduced by a kind of language, by the titles or funny text, whereas Ina's work, in a way, opens all kind of unexpected meanings by a kind of literalness. Your work is not literal at all, but I would say is very suggestive. They evoke, but do not really represent, eroticism and sexuality, but what kind of sexuality or whose sexuality is not at all clear. It is, I would say, a rethinking of the male body, but perhaps also a rethinking of the female body. But I think what is most interesting is that your work is not, there's nothing shameful about these explorations of the body, whatever they are, male or female. So could you expand on that, elaborate about that? What do you do? What do you exactly do by making works that are suggestive in this way?
I don't know. I start with the work and then it evolves and it goes on and on and on. But I started with the outside shape and a sort of inner shape, and things are popping out and are sticking in. So there's an inside and an outside. Especially with these two, there's more or less the inside is more important, and here's the outside is always important. It's three-dimensional as well, so I'm the only one here with sculpture, and it's white and it's pink. Yeah. So it's sort of beautiful shapes with things sticking out, and you could say it's sausages, or some people think it's having to do with the male penis, but I think it's more like wavings, and some other people think it's underwater plants. So it depends a bit on the person who is looking at it. And what you could say is when you look in it, then sometimes people are sort of maybe ashamed because they're peeping, and peeping is not normal, it's forbidden, I think, by law.
Yeah, it's voyeuristic.
So they're peeping in and they see something and you see them holding back. And I always wonder why, because there's a lot to see, because when I make them, you can move your eyes to the left, to the right, so that's the idea. And if you don't look
But
well,
I think it's much too simple to say that the holes in your works signify the female body and the bulging form signify the male body.
I never thought of that. It's more the idea of there's something happening inside the sculpture, because that actually I think I'm the first one who's doing that, but without having a sort of box where you look in and there's nothing happening on the outside. So it's equal important, and it's not like inside there's any women. There's
but
things happening.
You're saying now there's something happening inside the sculpture.
Yeah.
But you would not say there is something happening inside the body.
No. To me, it's a shape.
A shape.
Or the sort of main body.
Yeah.
But it's not like the inside of a person.
But the fact that your works are rather suggestive, I will not say that they represent the body, male or female, but that's you refrain from saying anything about that. No,
it's maybe it's flashy or having to do with flash.
Yeah.
And that's why it's important that it's pink, because if you make the pink bits white, it doesn't work.
I think what is very interesting then, also in how you answer my question, is that you refuse to talk about the male body and the female body as binary. It's almost as if there are sculptures that evoke the body, but there is a kind of fluidity between what kind of body it is.
Yeah, but also it has a certain direction, and that has to do with human thinking. So this is going that way, and you can look inside, and some are big and some are less important, and there's a lot of classical things, I think, as well.
Yeah.
It's not only about sex or it's more connotation.
No, one of the things I think which is very interesting is that for you, usually when we talk about sexuality, and especially about male sexuality, it is by definition a kind of battleground.
Yes.
Whereas you, in a way, represent, no, not represent, that's the wrong word. You suggest a kind of notion of sexuality which is a playground instead of a battlefield.
Well, in a way, some people think it's funny.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I think
exactly.
I think that's
no, but that is quite
important as well. It's not well.
that-
It's always serious, but it's
no, but that's very remarkable when you
Yeah.
say these works are funny, and it's not something which you are supposed to say today when it concerns sexuality. Yeah, because sexuality, especially after Me Too, is dead serious. It's not funny.
But they are that serious too. But and people want to touch them.
No.
And that's not allowed.
No.
So the
as,
whole
as sculptures, they are dead serious. But I would
Yes.
say what they suggest is different.
well, I think the most sexual thing is when I'm working on them because I have to polish them and polish the holes as well. So sometimes I think.
Let's not talk about that. That goes too far. But let's.
But
Just, I would like to ask you, but also
Yeah.
Ina, one more question. So, because it's very nice to see your works next to each other here. Here Ina's work, here your work, and there's more work of you there on the table. But I know you are great fans of each other's work. Where your work is also very different in many respects, but still, there's also a lot of affinity. So. And I already said that Ina's work is rather literal, also so often in its titles, and your work is very suggestive. But Ina, could you explain what attracts you in Hans' work?
Actually, it's always easier for me to explain why I don't like something. So, but all I can say about Hans's work is that I cannot get enough of looking at his work. And I think all the shapes, the different textures, the different colors, and the surfaces of the different material that he uses, I just enjoy it tremendously looking at his work. And I think the fact that I'm not allowed to touch it makes the looking even more exciting.
Okay, thank you, Ina. Hans, what attracts you in the work of Ina?
well, they're paintings and they're small paintings, and I think when you look at them, they come to you directly. It pops out. It's there's not much difference to me between the flower or a dig ant or a bit of fruit, because they're all the same, with the same attitude, and they're sort of juicy.
Yeah.
And also how it's painted in the square or in the rectangular form. They slightly like that one. Slightly turned, and they nearly touch the sides and the top. It comes from underneath, and it's nearly three-dimensional, and a lot of
this bursting penis burst out of the frame almost.
Yeah, but you don't.
Yeah.
I'm not looking like it's a dig ant, but it's more. To me, it's the same as a bit of fruit, or like it could explode, like that flower could explode too.
Yeah.
And it's not like you have to zoom in somewhere. No. It pops out to you, and that's nearly everywhere. And also it's very serious, a bit like because you were talking about the president of America, and I thought he's thinking of some, and like Merkel as well. They are thinking about something very important. That's what I thought, and it's the same is happening here. It's not funny, like you're looking at the red light district windows, and but it's serious classical painting actually, different.
Okay, what we see here is a work by the Norwegian artist Jeannette Christensen. Its title is La Reproduction Interdite. It is in a way kind of emblem for the exhibition as a whole. That's also why it is hanging here in the entrance where you enter the space. And of course, most people will recognize this this image in one way or another because it is based on a very famous Magritte painting, which is now in the museum Boijmans van Beuningen. But the person we are seeing here, of course, is not the same person as we see in the Magritte painting. This is the well-known, notoriously famous mass killer Breivik, who killed 77 people in 2011 in Oslo. What is so remarkable about this image? In a way, the mirror refuses to reproduce him, refuses to reflect him, to reflect him, and by this refusal, in a way, it bestows shame on him. Okay, let's go from here to this other work, which is also hanging in the entrance of Herengracht 401. Welcome, Arnoud Holleman. This is a work by Arnoud Holleman, and its title is Family and Friends. And it's quite, you see here a whole list or row of penises of all kinds of sizes and shapes. But I think what is quite remarkable that you would expect, especially when it concerns the penis, or that it is a kind of hierarchy or kind of picking order, but that's not at all at stake. Arnoud, could you explain how this work relates to the issue of shame or shamefulness, or could you say something about that?
Yeah, when I made those drawings, I think I looked for a middle ground, so to say. So on the one hand, I was aware of feelings of shame, of on the left you would have Freud with fear of castration, of sexuality, or everything that sort of evolves around it, and that makes us shameful. The biblical thing of shame in covering the penis, and on the other hand, there's kind of the free, liberated sexual body. What I really liked was that sort of, I read somewhere that Deleuze said about, he dismissed total the psychoanalysis of Freud in one sentence, saying that it's just a dirty little secret between the legs. And that's, I tried to look for the middle ground between Freud and Deleuze, so to say.
But he said a dirty little secret.
Between the legs.
Is this dirty?
No. And but that's why I said that I was looking for the middle ground, sort of and because, to be honest, I think for me, the aspect of shame is quite new to present these drawings. Yeah. And what I like about it is that shame, I think, is in the eye of the beholder. Yeah. That it's not intentional. That I was not dealing with the issue of shame in that sense.
Yeah. No, I think that's very, very important what you say, because what I see is not something shameful, but something which is perhaps adorable, vulnerable, but not shameful.
Yeah, and maybe an attempt to be objective. I'm not sure if that's ever possible, but
No, but objective, as earlier I talked about on the basis of one of Marlene Dumas' work, the making of myths, and when we see this, there's no reason at all to turn this into the myth of the phallus.
Yeah. Well,
just
I think
a male body part, nothing else.
Yeah. Freud explains the origin of myth in one sentence somewhere, and that has to do with the son overcoming the father, the son being bigger than the father. So that is, where the myth comes in Freud. And again, I was trying to find looking for an objective view, and therefore also paying a lot of attention to detail. And those details, but all the details in all these different individual works are, I think, quite amazing. And usually the way people look at penises, perhaps especially men, but I'm not sure,
women also perhaps, I'm not so, who has the biggest? And I think that's a complete non-issue here.
Yeah, no, it's not about size.
No, indeed, not about size. Okay, thank you, Arnoud. We now go to the last work in this exhibition. And that is in fact not something you can see. It is a sound piece by Philip Miller, but at the same time, here you see the vinyl records, and which also in a way has registered this sound piece, which you can hear in the room behind it. I will enter it now. The sound piece is called Special Boy, and Philip Miller has also written a text for the book, and it's about the sonic triggers for Special Boy, so for this sound piece which you can hear in this space. And by the way, in the back of the room you can also see another work by Marlene Dumas. And that's also very interesting. Let's first say something about Marlene Dumas in relation to the work of Jeannette Christensen. And Jeannette Christensen's work shows in a way the refusal of reflection on Breivik, which bestows shame on him. Whereas here, this is the opposite of a kind of refusal of reflection. Here you see a young boy reflecting on his erection, a big problem for him, clearly. Not something to be proud of, but rather a problem. But back to Philip Miller's work. The title of this sound piece is called Special Boy. And special is very ambivalent. What means it? Is special something which makes him something to be proud of, or means special something to be shameful of? Now, in his text, in the book, he explains that there are three very important issues that made himself special. First of all, when he was a young boy, his best friend was not a human being, but his best friend was the piano or music. Second, the second thing that made him very special and different, so and in that respect also shameful, was that he had a rather high-pitched voice, very different from other boys. The third issue, which made him special and perhaps also shameful, was to be a moffie. And moffie in Afrikaans, in South Africa, means a gay man. He was a moffie. So three things which made him special and different. Okay, and this is, now you can say, the beginning as well as the end of the exhibition. When you enter the exhibition, it will be one of the first rooms, but it is also, I think, a very nice closure of the exhibition as a whole, where you leave it and go back to your home. Okay, thank you.